Hello. I've thought a lot about all of the humanness, all of the human flaws that we carry, and the ways in which we could find power in the areas where you wouldn't really think so, so the unlikeliest of places. And one of those places is pain, suffering, sadness, all of those negative emotions that it feels really uncomfortable. And I really want to talk about ways that we could utilize the power of those negative emotions to find strength and will and hope and a brighter path, which is possible. I think naturally when a memory comes up, when we go about our day and you sort of think of something that makes you feel a type of way, it's easy to sort of sit in that. And I think something that I've had to really find is sort of a balance of sitting in a feeling to acknowledge that it's there and to make it feel seen, while also being mindful of not sitting in a feeling for too long to where you're sitting in suffering for the sake of suffering, which you don't want to do. And through trial and error, you could kind of find that line and you feel it, like you feel your body. So I know for me, I try my best to sit with the hard feelings. And when you're sitting with hard feelings, I think I've talked about this a couple of times in the past with people, where I try to tell people that it's really important to let yourself feel the hard feelings and to really let yourself sit with it, but also don't force yourself to feel stuff that you're not ready to feel. In the way of finding strength in our pain, I think you can do that where it sort of depends on your perspective. So the way I look at it is everyone has bad things that happen. A lot of it is out of our control. And in a way, that makes it easier. The bad stuff that happens that was totally out of your control, it is asking to be seen. And a good way to view it is sort of view handling your own tough feelings as if you were helping a friend. So typically when a friend is going through a tough time, like if your friend had a dog that passed away, your friend first just wants to feel the feelings of loss, the feelings of like, damn, this situation sucks. And you're with your friend and being like, yeah, I'm not going to pretend like what you just went through isn't bad. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's okay. Like you're not going to pretend like it didn't happen. First, you want to acknowledge that, yes, it happened. It sucks. But then after that, you tell your friend that, how can we move forward? Like, how can you sort of find ways to honor that feeling, honor that bad experience, and then also continue on with your life? So doing sort of like that thing. And I think when it comes with emotions that come up, which is very natural, I think I mentioned this before where I was talking to my therapist about the feeling of loss. And I had brought up to her how recently it was a feeling that I allowed myself to feel for the first time because I was ready to do that. I was ready to feel the feeling of losing anything I've ever lost in my life, abstract, physically, like in any sort of capacity. And she told me, because she's in her later years, I don't want to put an age, but I think she might be in her 60s or something. But she told me, she said, yeah, this is your first time experiencing it, and it's normal. You find as you get older, you're experiencing feelings that are just, you're going to have to learn how to get used to, learn how to manage. And with a lot of bad feelings, a lot of painful experiences, a lot of things that are sad, I think a lot of it is learning how to manage it when it comes up and not trying to run away from it, not trying to push it away, not letting yourself sit in a helpless feeling for too long, because then you could really fall into this mindset of you're a victim to life circumstances, and we don't want to do that. I think I think it's important to kind of figure out a way in which you could find strength in a bad experience, because it is really hard, it's really difficult, but it's possible. And I know I've put myself, or I've experienced a lot of painful emotional experiences where I was in situations where, the only way to move forward was to find the silver lining, was to find a way to turn a not so great situation into something that I can use to propel me forward. And I think with that mindset, yes, it might be survival, but it also is very, very productive. And I think that's how you can sort of find strength in the places where you wouldn't think there is any. I think a thought experiment that I had used recently that really helped me with this is thinking of it this way. So if you imagine that your bad thoughts, your bad experiences, your pain, your sadness, your suffering is sort of like this entity that is sort of like following you around, and you're kind of annoyed because you're like, why do you keep following me around? Like, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to like live my life. Like, stop following me around. You're kind of like in a way running from it. You're not really, because you don't know how to manage your relationship with it. So when you don't know how to deal with pain, sadness, suffering, it could feel really awkward to have it next to you because you're like, okay, you're next to me, but I don't know how am I supposed to deal or manage you being next to me. It feels uncomfortable. It feels awkward. I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know how to navigate this relationship. But you find that when you sit with this cloud of pain, this cloud of sadness, the cloud sort of disintegrates, and with underneath that cloud, you see a person, and that person is you. And that person is you when you were experiencing that painful, that sad moment. And when you see that person, you're like, oh, and you find that that person isn't just there to make your day terrible. It's not there to annoy you. It's there because it also wants to move forward, and it also wants to figure out a way that it could find strength, because there's a lot of terrible emotions. And I think an important thing to remember is that the bad feelings you feel aren't there to hurt you. It's not there to make your day more challenging. It's there because there's something that it wants to be seen, but it also wants to find a way to also move forward. Because I think it's important to remind yourself that everything you feel isn't just there for the sake of feeling terrible. It's there because it's a part of you. So similar to you, it wants to find a way to use this to find something that will help it move on. And I think that's what I'm finding a lot of these hard feelings do feel like it's asking for. Yes, it's calling to be seen, to be felt, but it's also calling for you to help it figure out a way that it can move on. And I think that's really important, because it's really easy when you feel a feeling that you know is going to always exist. It's hard to sort of reconcile with it or figure out a way to move on from it. Because in a way you feel like if you move on, you're forgetting it. If you move on, you're ignoring it. But that's not the case. Moving on is a way of setting that part of you free, setting yourself free from the chains of the past. Not in a bad way, but in a way that will help you become a stronger version of yourself. And I think when I had this conversation with my therapist, she brought up a lot of her experiences that she had gone with loss, because that was a topic we had brought up. And she was telling me how when she lost her mom, like, it's been years since she lost her mom, like maybe over a decade. And she's still every single now and then, every day, or every now and then, she has moments where the memory comes up, and she says, "Oh, hey, Mom, yeah." Like, the way she handles it is kind of like, "Oh, I see you, I remember you." Like, whenever she does something and a memory pops up, it doesn't bring her into this place of deep sadness. Instead, she figured a way for it to instead be like, "Oh, hey," it's like a reminder that she's there, that she's still there, and and she tries to find something to honor that feeling, that memory. So she'll set an item on her desk that was one of her mom's favorite items, and she'll look at it, and for a few minutes she'll allow herself to remember the positive memories, the tender memories that she had with her mom. And then in doing that, for that moment, she's honoring that feeling, and then she can move on without really allowing those feelings to consume her. And I think that was kind of what I took away from that conversation, is when feelings come up, not really letting yourself sink into this hole, but finding ways in which you can honor those feelings that are asking to be seen. So then both you and that experience could sort of reconcile and find peace in that moment, and then carry on with your day. So then you don't feel guilty, you don't feel shameful, you don't feel bad about the way you handled it. So I think that's what a lot of it is with finding strength. Because I know for me, I try my best to find strength in the things that have hurt me in the past. It's really challenging, but it's possible. What I try to do is I try to imagine myself if I were someone who had passed away. I think about passing away a lot. It's something I've always thought about. And I think, as a really mini sidetrack, I think it's really important to think about death often. And I think there was a point a couple months ago where it was something I always thought about, because I felt like it's not something that we should ignore. I think I read a book. Oh, I actually have a really good book that, if I'm being honest, I should probably continue reading this book. So this book, I don't know if you can see the title. It's called How We Live is How We Die. Now, I got this book maybe a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago. And I'll be honest, this book is really tough to read. It almost reminds me of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Now, this book is tough, but it's also really important because it brings up a lot of really important truths. The obvious one is dying. Now, everyone dies. You can't avoid the topic. It's kind of like just what happens. And I think what the book really speaks on is how to manage that truth every day. So how can you sort of find peace with the truth that you're going to eventually pass away? And as you continue living, people around you who you care about are going to pass away. And that's just like a truth. And something this book touches on very beautifully is the idea that everyone experiences the same emotions in different ways. So it was sort of inviting you to understand that a way to sort of make peace with a lot of the hard truths in life is to remind yourself that you're not the only one who has to face these truths. Everyone around you has felt and will continue feeling all these tough feelings. And there's a sort of comfort and a sort of peace to be found in knowing that every stranger you see, everyone in your life is also in their own way trying to grapple with the difficult truths of life. And it's nice to know that, everyone's in it together, because it makes you want to approach everyone with a lot more empathy, including yourself. Now, I didn't want to talk too much about loss because I know pain and sadness could be far beyond it. But this is just a recent an example that came up. So I guess the last thing I'll say about it is another thing that really helps with navigating how to handle really hard feelings of losing someone physically is sort of imagining how that person would want you to deal with those feelings. Oftentimes, my dad, who passed away, there will be moments in which he will visit me in my dreams. It's very brief, but also very beautiful. And those moments make me really happy. And I take it as he's just saying hi. He's passing by. He's visiting. And there are a lot of moments in life where that sort of happens, where I'll just be going about my day and I'll see something that's kind of like, whoa. Or I'll find something and it sort of feels like he's just saying, hey, what's up? And then I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? I remember you. And it's like a nice little thing. And I think trying to view that situation and all right, if I passed away, how would I want my loved ones to deal with it? How would I want people around me to deal with it? Would I want the people I care about to sort of be in this deep sadness and hold on to that for so long? No, I want people to be happy. And it also reminds you of how you often see people talking about I know for me and my family, it's really common for my family members to say, when I pass away in the funeral, I want it to be a party. I don't want people crying too much. I want people to really remember the good things. I want people to be happy. I don't want people to sit in suffering for so long. And that's just something that I know in Spanish culture could be really popular, where, people really don't want the people they care about to sit in that bad feeling for too long. You want to find ways to celebrate life, not so much mourn all those painful emotions, because if you were to pass away, you wouldn't want the people you care about to just sit in that despair for so long. Like, it feels really painful. And that's what I just try to remind myself, so that when I am sort of mourning the losses of those who have passed, I tell myself, like, let me honor them in a way that will be like, I remember you. But I don't want to sort of sit in a really bad headspace, because I don't think that's what they would have wanted either. But yeah, I think my point in like sharing the book and all of this is a thing I really realized in thinking a lot about passing away, is the more you become comfortable with that idea, the easier it feels to sort of make peace with it and to go about your day, understanding it and knowing how to navigate it when those feelings do come up. Because I also read, it could have been in this book or in another book that was very, very interesting. It's that oftentimes when someone passes away, people have a hard time sitting with the unalived body. And I think, it was in the show Midnight Gospel. In the show The Midnight Gospel. I keep talking about the show, but it's just such an amazing show. In one of the episodes, the character was saying how it's really important that when someone passes away, that you take the time to sit with that body that's no longer living, because in that way you're making peace with it. And I wish I almost I kind of want to find the clip, because the way the character described it was so beautiful. I don't want to like ruin by paraphrasing it, because I don't really remember, but she pretty much was just saying how stressing the importance of really accepting and just finding peace with someone not being there with you anymore by sitting with that body that's no longer with you, because it's really easy to not even want to be in the same room because it's traumatic and you don't want experiencing it. And I'll be very honest, I don't remember standing in front of my dad's body when he passed away. Like, that's just like a memory that I don't have. I think I might have blocked it out because I wasn't ready to accept it at that moment. But I do think it's really important to try your best when it does happen to really just be comfortable with it. I think I saw a TikTok, and in the TikTok video, a girl asked a really interesting question. She said, if you were sitting at a bar and the Grim Reaper, or this image of death, sat next to you and said, this was your final moment, but I'm gonna have a drink with you and we could have a conversation and you could talk to me about anything before that happens, what would you talk about? Or how would you deal with that conversation? Like, what would you ask the Grim Reaper, knowing that would be your last conversation and your last moment before you were gonna go to the other side? And I think I commented something, but I forgot what I said, but it was just something really interesting to think about. But I think my whole point is being comfortable with it helps you move on from it, or like move forward with it. I don't want to say move on because it has this bad connotation, but really just like find strength in it to move forward and find ways to honor it while also moving on with your life, or moving forward with your life. And I think with a lot of sad and painful feelings, a lot of difficult experiences, I don't think there's a way to ever fully 1,000%, 100% move on from it. Because I think when you go through an unpleasant experience throughout life, there are always going to be moments where the memories come up, where feelings come up. And it's easy to feel shameful, to judge yourself, to be like, oh man, like I thought I had moved on from this. Like I thought I dealt with this already. And you did. And I think it's very human, it's very normal to have feelings come up, because you're not going to forget things. Like, if something was really important and you had a lot of feelings for a certain situation that you outgrew, or a situation that no longer is a part of your life, you're not going to forget it. Like, you're not going to delete that part of yourself. Like, this isn't a movie. I forgot what the movie's called. It might be called Eternal Sunshine or something, where there was like a machine and the guy plugged himself up to the machine because he wanted to forget his ex, or he wanted to forget a really bad experience. Like, that's not how the body works. And I think when we make peace with that, we make peace with the fact that hard feelings are going to come up. So every bad breakup, every breakup in general, it doesn't have to be bad, but every breakup, every loss, every terrible experience you've been through, part of the process of, I think, making peace with it is understanding that those feelings are going to reoccur and come back throughout your life. Years, maybe during the moments where you thought you forgot about it, it's going to pop up because something you see, something might trigger that memory. And I think it's important to prepare yourself of how you're going to handle it when it does, and understand that, all right, when those feelings do come up, do I have a game plan? Do I understand, like, in what way, for me, am I going to be able to handle those feelings? I know for me, something I've been doing recently, if I'm being honest, is I've been using this light. So whenever I have feelings of like, damn, where I'm like kind of, in a way, I guess, mourning something, I turn the light on, like that. And I imagine that whatever thing I'm thinking about that I'm mourning, whatever thing I'm sad about, that I'm using this light as like a focal point. So then I'm able to focus on the light as like the object, or the thing, or the experience, or the person in which the feelings are about. And it could be like literally anything. But like I said, it's important to honor those feelings when you feel it, even if you did move on from it, even if you don't really feel it anymore. Like, it's important to acknowledge whatever feelings you need to feel, and not judge it, and not feel shame about it. And that's a good way that my therapist and my grandma, and like you see people really doing, finding a way to honor feelings, and then sitting with it, and then being like, all right, thank you, and then going about your day. And I know there's other ways you can do it. Like, music, again, is very powerful. So if I have a memory of an experience that for whatever reason I'm feeling very nostalgic, and I'm like, damn, like, I missed that memory, I'll put on a song that reminds me of the memory, and I'll take a few minutes to allow myself to enjoy the positive feelings that I have from that memory, and just really enjoying it and kind of like letting myself feel it. So then after the song ends, I can be like, okay, thank you. And then I could continue on with my day. Again, it's like really tough, but finding stuff like this to help you, I think, is really important, because then you won't get caught off guard. Because I know another conversation that came up with my therapist this week was she was telling me about how she has her career as a social worker is she dealt a lot with people who struggled with addiction, people who struggled with emotional trauma. And she was saying how a lot of the times when people are trying to get sober, someone could be sober for 15 years, but then they experience a tragic event in their life, and that triggers them to return back to the substance, even if they were totally clean. And I asked her, I was like, well, is there any point in which that person is getting prepared for that moment? Because I think that's something that you should be getting prepared for. Like, prepare for the moment where maybe in the future there's going to be a big trigger and you're going to want to go back and relapse. But is there like a plan that person could use, set in place, where they could be like, okay, like, I'm mentally prepared for this. It could be hard, but what can I try instead of like relapsing? And that was just like a question that I asked. And I think it's good to think about that sort of thing. Like, how can you prepare yourself for the worst? How can you prepare your future self for reoccurring memories that you think you might have, or that might come up, so that it doesn't catch you off guard and you don't feel deeply distraught when those memories do come up, because you assumed that you would never feel those feelings again. Because it's better to assume that at some point you might feel those feelings again, and that's totally normal, and everyone goes through it, even if a lot of people don't talk about it, because no one really wants to talk about that sort of thing. But bad feelings come up all the time. And I think it's important to like figure out how you can find a way to honor that for yourself. And it could be literally anything. I know for me, I honor my younger child a lot by getting small objects that I know she would have liked. So I try to honor my younger self by having a stuffed animal on my bed. I even thought about honoring the younger version of myself who lost her favorite stuffed animal by trying to find a replica of that stuffed animal and like putting it around somewhere. So then whenever I do have these feelings of loss for my younger self, I could look at the stuffed animal and be like, I'm honoring you in that way. And then she could feel seen, acknowledged, and we could both move forward, you know? So I think, I hope I touched on what I wanted to touch on. I think my biggest point was I wanted to talk about finding strength in the things that hurt you, because I do think it's really easy to not know how to handle the hard stuff, especially after you thought that you kind of made peace with it, and then you find yourself thinking about it during the times where you thought you wouldn't have wanted to think about it. I think a common one is kind of like when you break up with someone and then like you're with someone new, and then it's easy to feel sort of shameful or judgy when you're like, why am I now thinking about my ex when I'm with this new person who I'm happy with? And there's no shame in that. I think it's really normal to have passing memories of good times you had with people, and to understand that yes, you could move on from that situation, you could move on from those people, but I mean, positive memories are always going to be positive memories, and it's good to acknowledge them and to say, yeah, that was nice, I see it, and then just acknowledge it and keep going on with your day, keep going on with your moment and your life. I hope that all made sense. This is something that I always continue to think about, and I just kind of wanted to share where my headspace is at around it, because I think maybe it could be useful for the interwebs. But I think, thinking about the hard truths in life, I think is really important, and it makes stuff feel a lot more manageable, because I think you're less likely to want to run away from the hard stuff when you allow yourself to accept it, to feel it, and to just make peace with it and be like, hey, you know, it's going to be right next to me for the rest of my life. So instead of me trying to look away, let me try to figure out a way that I can just manage it being there and understand it, and figure out a way that we could both just have a good time together, because you're not going to be able to run away from the stuff you want to run away from. Like at one point or another, you're going to have to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to escape it, and you can't escape stuff. That's not how it works. You're going to have to figure out a way to deal with it gently. It doesn't have to be tough. And you find that things aren't as bad as you thought it was going to be. And I think when you understand that the parts of yourself that you are scared of, that you're running away, those parts aren't bad. They're not out there trying to hurt you, because at the end of the day, those parts are you. And it could feel really scary, it could feel really hard, and the parts that you're running away from could feel sort of like this thing coming after you, but it's not, because it's you, and you're not gonna want to hurt you. It's asking for something. It wants the same thing that you want. It wants to move forward, and it wants to figure out a way to move forward. So I think when you approach yourself with that mindset, it's a lot easier to figure out how to have better relationships with the different parts of you, and sort of figure out ways that you can integrate those parts of you and, you know, manage that relationship in a really healthy way. Because that's something that I had to learn. I had to learn that, you know, the parts of myself that sometimes I don't want to look at, it's not there to get me out. It's not out to get me. It's there because it also wants to figure out a way to not feel that pain anymore, and figure out a way to move forward without feeling those terrible emotions, because you don't have to sit in suffering for too long. And that's something that I really had to learn on. That's something that I had to really learn, because one of my favorite books of all time is the book Man's Search for Meaning, which I think I already made a video. I made a video already about my favorite books, and this is probably one of my top 5 favorite books. It talks about a man surviving the Holocaust, and the way in which he survived the Holocaust was in finding hope and sort of being delusional. And him really believing that his family was still alive, that got him through the hardest thing ever. And he was able to find the strength and find meaning. He was able to find meaning in suffering. And I think when you try to find meaning in suffering, for me, for most of my life, I thought finding meaning in suffering meant that I had to sit in suffering, and I had to, in a way, force myself to suffer in order to feel deserving of joy, to feel deserving of the positive things, because I felt like if I didn't feel suffering, then I didn't deserve to feel the positive stuff. And it wasn't until this year, if I'm being honest, that it really clicked, thanks to my therapist, where she said, you don't have to force yourself to sit in a bad feeling because you feel like you have to do that in order to feel deserving of all the great things that could happen for you. Like, you don't have to believe that. That's a choice. And it also touches on, like, take the pieces that resonate. Because she said, like, you could admire the message of a book. You could admire the messages that you're learning from something. But take the pieces that resonate. I'm not someone living in the Holocaust. I don't have to sit in terrible headspaces and force myself to do that to feel like I have to attract really amazing things. And I think that's easy to fall into when you're a thinker, because I know for me, I'm someone who understands that there's two sides of a coin. In order to enjoy the light, you have to accept the dark, and vice versa. Like, you can't have light without dark. You can't have one thing without the other. Opposites need one another. That's how balance is formed. And I think for a long time, I had interpreted it with that in order for me to really sit with the light, with the good stuff, I really had to force myself to sit equally as much or more with the other side of the stuff. But you don't really have to do that. You can exist gently. Things can happen a lot more gently. And that kind of touches on the grays in life. Like, things aren't so black and white. There's a gray. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to put yourself through situations you don't have to put yourself through. There's a way to live more gently. I know I said a lot of things, but yeah, I think everything sort of tied in together. So that's kind of just what I wanted to say today. I hope this made somebody. I hope this was nice. Okay, talk to you later. Actually, before I head out, I want to read a few excerpts or a few words from the book. And it's actually pretty nice because I haven't even read this book. I haven't looked at this book in like a long time. I think the last time I looked at this book was when I had a kidney infection, and I literally thought I was going to die. It was actually pretty scary. I had a kidney infection 2 years ago on Christmas. And it wasn't a kidney infection, but it was a really bad UTI, and it almost reached my kidneys. And I literally thought I was going to pass away. Like, I was ready to die. I was like, this is my last moment. And I was really grappling with my life. I was like, I'm not ready to go. I joke about going, but I'm not ready. I want to live. And then I picked up this book and was trying to figure out how I wanted to spend my last moments here. But I ended up not passing away. I was just really scared. Anyways, I'm going to read a passage called The Meaning of Suffering. We must never forget that we may also find meaning in life, even when confronted with a hopeless situation. When facing a fate that cannot be changed. For what then matters is to bear witness to the uniquely human potential at its best, which is to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to turn one's predicament into a human achievement. When we are no longer able to change a situation, just think of an incurable disease, such as a cancer. We are challenged to change ourselves. Let me cite a clear-cut example. Once, an elderly general practitioner consulted me because of his severe depression. He could not overcome the loss of his wife, who had died 2 years before and who he loved above no one else. Now, how could I help him? What should I tell him? Well, I refrained from telling him anything, but instead I confronted him with the question, what would have happened, doctor, if you died first and your wife would have had to survive you? Oh, he said, for her, this would have been terrible. How would she have suffered? Where I would have replied, you see, doctor, such a suffering has been spared for her, and it was you who have spared her the suffering. To be sure, at the price that now you have to survive and mourn her. He said no word, but shook my hand and calmly left my office. In some way, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And that meaning for the doctor was the meaning of a sacrifice. Now this is like honestly one of my favorite passages, and I might actually reread this book. I saw this is one of my special numbers, 117. That means something, 117. Anyways, this is one of my favorite passages of the whole entire book, and a passage I think about really often, and finding meaning in suffering. So the therapist helped the old man find meaning in losing his wife and telling him, like, listen, you're the one who has to bear this suffering and mourn her loss. She was able to pass away peacefully. You're doing her a favor. You're sacrificing yourself. You're the one that has to bear this feeling. You spared your wife from bearing this feeling. So that's a really great way to also sort of think about loss, where it's like the person you lost, sort of in a way, you sacrificed because you're the one who has to bear all these terrible feelings. Like, could you imagine, like, you're the one who passed away and how terrible you would feel about all of your loved ones and the mourning you and all that stuff? That's a really good way to look at it. So here's another one from another book, from this one. Having empathy and tenderness for others is based on having empathy and tenderness for ourselves. To the degree that we can feel what we feel, to the degree we will be able to know firsthand what others feel. How can we really know what others are going through and feeling towards them if we haven't felt these feelings ourselves and developed a tenderness for our own sorrows? Therefore, an important step into transforming into seeds of virtue is getting in touch with a sense of warm-heartedness towards yourself. Imagine that from this moment on, you are going to accept yourself, your propensities, your shortcomings, the whole package. Imagine if you could just trust that you are not a threat to yourself, that you are here to help yourself. Cultivating a feeling of unconditional warmth to yourself is the foundation of being able to transform your love for others. For example, if you're a compulsive liar and you hate the fact about yourself, you'll always turn away from any opportunity to take a look at what's going on. You'll be too scared and threatened to even ask yourself why you lie so much, what you're trying to achieve, and what you're trying to avoid. This denial will give the problem ideal, perfect conditions to grow, like mold, like a parasite that thrives in the dark. But if you develop a curiosity and a sympathy towards your tendency to lie, not feeding it, but exploring it, you'll naturally begin to have empathy for others who do the same thing, and you'll understand how much misery that this tendency causes, and how it prevents people from ever feeling right about themselves, and how that low self-esteem often leads to them striking out at the world. You'll also then understand how hard it is to stop lying, even when it becomes painfully obvious of how good it would be to stop. We can only stand in the shoes of others to the degree that we can stand in our own shoes. When we turn a blind eye to our own emotions and our own shortcomings, we cut ourselves off from others. That's really powerful. It speaks for itself. Yeah, dude, you really got to accept you have to take a look at everything, even the hard stuff. Like, it's really hard, but you really have to take a look at everything, and in doing that, you gain a lot more sympathy for yourself, a lot more love for yourself, and a lot more love for other people. So I think that's it for now. I might look at other stuff. I actually might reread this book and all that good stuff, so I might come up with more ideas, but see you later.